Luis J. Rodriquez has emerged as one of the leading Chicano writers in the country with 15 published books in memoir, fiction, nonfiction, children's literature, and poetry. Luis's poetry has won a Poetry Center Book Award, a Penn Josephine Miles Literary Award, and a Patterson Poetry Book Prize, among others. Luis is best known for his 1993 memoir of gang life, Always Running, La Vida Loca, Gang Days in LA. His latest book is the long-awaited sequel to Always Running, entitled It Calls You Back, an odyssey through love, addiction, revolutions, and healing, out by Simon & Schuster, released in the fall of 2011. He's appeared on Oprah and Good Morning America and received rave reviews from the Los Angeles Times, New York Times, People Magazine, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, ELAC's own, returning for the second year, alum, Luis Rodriquez.
Thank you. How you guys doing so far? Good, good. And I know the evening's getting late, and I'm sure that many of you would like to be going home soon. But I just wanted to, first of all, honor those stories and voices that we just heard. How valuable and beautiful that is. I want you all to give them all a big hand because what I really love about being here is that's what you hear. You hear these stories of people who had so many obstacles, so many things in their ways, and yet they still kept pursuing, thriving, and making it. That to me is really the importance of what you're doing here. Honoring ELAC, for example, because ELAC is a school that for a lot of people was the last resort for them. And it helped them by having somebody impact their lives. I have to tell you that I just heard that Carol Lim died just to see me. I didn't know. Carol Lim was one of my friends. She was very strong in pushing Chicano authors, a lot of authors, but she also was very strong in getting my book out to people. 30 years ago, I got published, one of the first places I got published was Milestone magazine. So, and I don't know if people knew that I had a little piece in there. So to me, it's a very sad thing to know that Carol is no longer with us because she really impacted the lives of a lot of people. So I wanted you to know how much she meant to me. I also wanted to mention this, and I'm sure I might have mentioned it last time, but I don't even remember what I said last time, so I'll just keep. I did have a very strong connection with East LA College. When I was lost, not sure how I was going to become a writer, how I was going to make it, I ended up going to night classes at East LA. And I met a very important man who was Mr. Takagi. And I don't know if I mentioned Mr. Takagi last time, but I'll mention it again. He was the journalism teacher for the night school. And when I first got there was 15 kids. I say kids, but they were really young adults. Most of them were working class people, probably had jobs during the day, had kids. So you know what happens? The next time we showed up, nobody's in the class but me. Because everybody has things to do. You know how that goes. So Mr. Takagi told me, sorry, but I can't have this class. I need more students, and I'm gonna have to, close it down, and maybe you show up next semester. I was so disappointed because I really wanted to be a journalist. I didn't know how to do it. East LA College was the only place you can get journalism classes in the East LA area, and I was like, I didn't know what to do. But I understood. Why would Mr. Takagi continue the class? So I left, but I'm pretty sure that he saw the disappointment in my face because he stopped me before I walked out the door. And this is how people impact your life. He told me that if I was willing to come every week, he would show up. You understand how important that was? I don't even think he got paid. I showed up every week and Mr. Takagi was there every week. And every week I came and he was there. And I'm sure he preferred to be at home, watching TV, probably with his kids, whatever, but he was there to teach this one crazy East LA kid to become a writer. Mr. Takagi also helped me get into the summer program for minority journalists at UC Berkeley. It was his letters and recommendations, and I got to be there, and I did get a certificate from this program. I never got any degrees, no college degrees. I never got East LA college degrees, I have to be honest with you. I was a student there. I never got any degrees, but I did get into journalism, and I did spend the last 30 years pretty much writing as a life. This is important because as many of you know, for my story, similar to the story of some of the young people here, I was one of those kids from Mexico that couldn't speak English, that was started in Watts and was beaten if you spoke Spanish. You know, in those days, if you spoke Spanish, they would swat you. And I tell people this, and they don't believe it happened. It did happen. I know some of you even remember when they used to do this. I recall that they didn't know where to put me, and no teacher wanted me, so they ended up putting me in the corner, and I just built blocks for a whole year. I recall that I was a very pissed off kid, and when I was 7 years old, I didn't know why. I used to love to steal. Going into markets, filling my lunchbox full of little toys, half of which I didn't even play with. When I was 8 years old, because I was bullied by everybody because I couldn't speak English, I started pushing little kids off balconies, you know, pulling little girls by their pigtails, because those are usually the girls who like. So, you know, pulling by the pigtails. I was a kid that I used to stick kids with pins, and people couldn't figure me out. They don't know why I was angry. I ended up moving to the East LA area. I ended up moving to South San Gabriel and San Gabriel, and then ended up in a neighborhood that many of you might know, South San Gabriel, Las Lomas. People don't know that that was the poorest neighborhood in LA County at the time. And if people don't remember South San Gabriel, you remember there was dirt roads, little shacks. There was one street, Bernie Street, that used to be known as Little Tijuana, Little TJ, because it was really bad news. And many people who know that area, you know what I'm talking about. My little street in La Presa was actually just outside the hills. It was still part of South San Gabriel then. Now it's part of Rosemead. But it actually was a road, small little, I don't think it was paved, but it was no curbs or nothing. It went right into a cornfield. And that cornfield is now the Edison offices. People don't realize how rural it was. And it used to be an old migrant camp. In the 30s and 40s, the first residents of that area were what they used to call Okies and Arkies. Remember them? They were people from the Dust Bowl. And they ended up there in 1930. That neighborhood was actually known as Wilmar because a lot of them came from the small town in Arkansas called Wilmar. And they used to have a tattoo, this is in the 30s, white people, poor white people, they used to have this tattoo of a donkey and Wilmar. That was their insignia because of them coming from Arkansas. But in the 40s, it became all Mexican, and then it became Las Lomas. And unfortunately, by 1951, a terrible war began that has taken on bigger dimensions over the years between our little neighborhood in South San Gabriel, Las Lomas, and another poor Mexican neighborhood called Sangra. And I mention this because it was a war that a lot of people died in. A lot of people that should not have died. It still continues to this day. And I was part of that war, unfortunately, in the 60s and 70s. I joined the Lomas gang. I didn't know what I was really doing. I was so attracted to these cholos that were so tough, and everybody was scared of them, and I was such a broken down, shy kid, 11 years old. I thought I wanted to be that. So I joined this gang to be part of that. I didn't really know what a gang was. I didn't really know what the cholo culture was, but it was so attractive to me. You understand what I'm saying? When you're a broken down, shy kid, and you can't find anything, you got so much emptiness in your home, in your life, around you, and you think, they're going to fill it. They're going to make it something. I remember that it was an old gang because there used to be grandmothers that used to chase their grandkids down the street. They had all these tattoos on them. And I go, what is it with these people, you know? And I was attracted to that life. And when I was 12 years old, I started doing the drugs, including the first heroin. So I got into all the drugs and heroin, every drug you can imagine, including heroin. By 15, I was kicked out of the schools and I was kicked out of the house. I was living homeless in the streets of downtown LA, homeless, and the body was up here. I remember sleeping in abandoned cars. I remember sleeping in all-night movie theaters. I remember the churches used to be open nowadays. I don't think they keep them open. They used to be open. You could sleep in the pews. I used to remember the homeless that I was with. Many were heroin addicts. But I would tell you one thing that was very important for me that I know changed my life. I loved to read books. And when I was homeless in the streets, I would go to the central downtown library. And I would clean up like everybody else. A lot of people even went to sleep there, but I would devour those books. I was the only one in my neighborhood that loved books. Nobody in my family loved books. In fact, I was kind of like the weird homie, you know, because I would come to the neighborhood with books, you know. People thought it was weird. Of course, half the guys used to be beat up, so it didn't matter, you know. They couldn't make fun of me too much. But I thought that was it. The books were my destiny. I didn't know they were my destiny. You understand? I didn't know that they were calling me, but they were there. And it took maybe an impact of one teacher, one person to come into my life and say, you know, you can do more than this. And I have to mention a person who, for some reason, found this little neighborhood that was hidden away from everybody, really rough, mean neighborhood. People remember Las Lomas. They talk about it in those days. Now, by the way, South San Gabriel's completely changed, as you know. It's one of the better neighborhoods. It's completely got gentrified. There's townhouses there, there's nice homes. It changed. But in those days, that neighborhood was like nobody would come there, nobody would hang there. And guess what? A Brown Beret, one of the founders of Brown Berets, a UMAS member that started the UMAS that later became Mecha, ended up from East LA, ended up working at the youth center there. What were the chances of that? That this guy would find a kid like me? Because if he hadn't been there, I know I wouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? That he had showed up, and here's what the story was. One night, I broke in there and did all this graffiti on all the walls, you know. And that weekend, I showed up because I wanted to see my work, you know. And of course, everybody knew it was me because I put my placazo everywhere, my gang names everywhere. People knew it was me. I wasn't hiding, and I walked in there, and I'm looking at my work and admiring my work. And it was pretty elaborate graffiti work. The center people wanted to get rid of me, and they told the youth center, you got to get rid of him. Call the cops, you know. But you know what he did? He didn't do that. He came to me and he says, you know what? Why don't you learn how to paint murals? I had no idea what he was talking about. Yeah, paint murals. I'll even help you. I'll help you go to Goes Art Gallery on First Street in East LA. I don't know if you guys remember that far back, but the Goes was one of the leading art institutions in East LA. They were painting the Strata Courts housing projects. Some of those murals were still there. And he says, you'll go there on the weekends, I'll teach you how to paint murals. Okay, whatever, you know, whatever, that was the whole thing, you know, I don't care. But you know what, he said something else, but I want you to do something. What? I want you to go back to school. I want you to go back to that high school. You know what, I didn't have anybody offer me nothing. I didn't have any reason to say no, any reason to say yes, but I did it. And that summer, I painted 8 murals in Rosemead, South San Gabriel, including one of the old Del Mar Library. I'm under Mr. Moreno knows that one. Little box of a library, there's hardly any books, you know, and I painted murals inside there. Can you imagine somebody impacting my life that way? A tattooed, heroin-using street kid and somebody saying, you can paint a mural? You understand how powerful that is? And yeah, I still messed up, because you know from reading over his running, you know I was back and forth, you know, I one step forward, 2 step back, that kind of thing. Back and forth, but you know what? Those things are so valuable, and I needed to fall back on them. It was those voices that helped deal with the screams in my head. You understand what I'm getting at? Those voices of sanity in the midst of the insanity. Those voices of reason in the midst of the madness. That's why we need them. That's why we have to hear them. That's why Carol Lynn was important. That's why Mr. Takagi is important. You understand? There's somebody who's trying to set you right amidst all this wrongness. And it worked for me. It took a while. It worked for me. I want you to know how important this is, because earlier this year, this book, my newest book, just came out last year, was a finalist for one of the 3 most important book awards in the whole country, the National Book Critics Circle Award. You know how difficult it is to be a finalist. The 2,000 to 3,000 books a year, only 30 finalists, and I was one of them. And from East LA, you understand? I went to New York City, and I got to read part of this book to all these critics and all these publishers, and I want to tell you what's really sad. They had never heard of me, and they had never heard of Chicanos. I was really sad. This is the publishing capital of the world. But somebody nominated me, I got accepted as a finalist, and now for the first time they're hearing my voice. I didn't win, I wasn't going to win, but that wasn't the point. The point was that this heroin addict, gang member, foolish young man was standing up there reading to the world a piece of our story. You understand? And that to me is what's important. For all of you and all the young people who feel lost, feel confused, feel like they can't go anywhere, feel like there's so many obstacles in their way, the only thing I can say, you won't ever stop the obstacles, but you can break through them. You can get stronger. And don't ever stop with that dream. Because if anything keeps you going, it's that dream to do better than even you imagine you can do. Because that's the big dream. That's a dream bigger than anything. The kind of dream that Mr. Takagi imagined for me somehow. That Carol Lim and others thought that maybe I could do. And this young man that ended up in the youth center in my neighborhood, middle nowhere, finding somebody like me. The intersections that allows us to be fuller and more complete as human beings. That to me is what's important. And that's the job that I know Mr. Sanchez has done. Because I hear it in the stories. That's the job of Homeboy Industries. Homeboy Industries, where you at? Because raise your hands, man. Raise your hands. So they do that to people who are tattooed, been shot at, got nowhere to go, can't get a job, and guess what? Somebody says, you're still a valuable, worthwhile human being. That is important. And last Saturday, I spoke at the Central Juvenile Hall, one of the largest juvenile lockups in the world. I was there a couple of times when I was a young man. And here I am speaking to these kids, hundreds of kids. They brought them from all the LA County probation juveniles and camps and everything. They brought them in there. They all read poetry. And I was in tears just listening to them because of the beauty of their words and the power of their stories. And somehow somebody came in their life and gave them the skills to be able to put them together. And they weren't just the lightweight kids. They had the murderous kids. They had the kids that were in the psych wards. They had the suicidal kids. You understand? And they were all so beautiful. I wish the world could have seen them. I wish the whole world could have seen them. Because then you would know that you can't write nobody off. That you can never give up on anybody. Because I don't care how rough things are, everybody is worth fighting for. And if there are lost causes, those are the best causes, aren't they? The lost causes are the best ones to fight in. Because if they're going to win, what kind of cause is that? You don't need that. You want to be in a cause that everybody says cannot win. Because that's the cause worth winning for. And that's the one that I want to challenge you to be part of. For our kids. Undocumented or not, there's no such thing as an undocumented kid. Somebody puts a label on a kid like that, and it could be illegal. You understand how wrong that is? No human being is illegal. No human being should be given a name that undocumented. Everybody has a right to be on this earth. Everybody has a right to be strong. Everybody has a right to be healthy. And we should fight for that in our communities. We should fight for that in our schools. And that's what Mr. Sanchez represents. That's what East LA College represents. That's what Homeboy Industries represents. And that's what you represent. Fight for everybody. Because everybody means something and everybody's worth something. And you don't know what good Jose, how old are you, Jose, brother? Jose Rodriquez, how old are you? 34? Oh, 34? Okay. He's the same age as my daughter. So he's another generation. My oldest son is going to be 37 this year. And as you know from reading Always Running, you know that my son was also a very troubled young man. And he had it a lot worse than I had it. He didn't quite make it, as some of you know. You know that since the age of 17, he was serving prison sentences. At age 21, he was sentenced to 28 years in prison. It's very sad, as you know, when a father has to deal with his own failures, because I have to accept my failures above everything else, and then try to step up when you were already so far behind. You know what that means. But I had to do it. I had to do it for my daughter, who is 34 years old this year. She's going to be 35 next month. And I had to do it for my son. And I had to do it for my two young sons. By the way, I have my beautiful wife, Trini, and I want to introduce her because she is the mother. Both they go to college, one goes to Mission College, and the other one's finishing high school right now. They're doing really great. But I do want to say something about my two oldest kids who were not doing so great and how hard it was to be a father to them. And I had to step up and I had to learn. One of the first things I had to do was to sober up. I've been clean and sober for 18 years, and that to me was one of the most important things. For 27 years of my life, I was on heroin, for 7 years on all kinds of drugs and heroin, and I was 20 years drinking in a big dream. And I finally woke up from that dream. Anyway, the good news, and this book kind of deals with it, is my son, my oldest son, finally got released from prison 2 summers ago. He did a total of 15 years. And as anybody who knows from Homeboy Industries, how hard it is to have to be in this world when you've got all those felonies, all those years, the doors that get closed on you, how nobody wants anything to do with you, how you're going to be judged by your worst act your whole life, and that should never be. My son did some things wrong. He paid for them. He understands he did wrong, and he himself, after seeing my example, I'm pretty sure, decides to get clean and sober and get out of gang life and to leave that world. And right now, my son is now a gang intervention specialist and a gang prevention worker. He's doing very well considering everything that's against him. But I know that I'm very proud of my son, just so you know. I'm very proud of him because in spite of everything, he has decided that he's going to do some good. And in the beginning, he wanted to follow my footsteps, but the wrong footsteps. Now he's following my footsteps, but the good ones. The steps that are going somewhere. Anyway, I want to end with this statement by him because he probably says it better than anybody. The value of finally coming home. And I always feel that when I'm here, especially in East LA, I am coming home. I now live in the San Fernando Valley, and I actually love the San Fernando Valley. I have great people, great family. I can't say anything bad in the San Fernando Valley because my wife grew up there, so I got to keep it cool. No, I think San Fernando Valley is a great place. But my heart, as I've told the people on the group table there, is always in East LA. So it's always good to come back because it's always like being home and being among you. But I want to read to you the thing that my son wrote because in many ways to me it was powerful, it was meaningful, and it really completed a circle in my life and in our lives. And my son's name is Ramiro Rodriquez. He's 37. He is also the father of 3 kids, 2 girls and 1 boy. All of them are teenagers, you can imagine. In fact, my oldest grandson is now going to college in Florida. So things are good in that sense. But I wanted to read what he wrote when he got out of prison, so at least you know how powerful it is when people make this change. And it ends like this. This is from my son Ramiro. I've had over 13 years of he was in this last sentence with 13 and a half years. I've had over 13 years of psychological warfare. My mind has been a battlefield with many casualties, disconnections, reconnections, everything's new. It feels good to see my kids, my family, and everyone who has supported me. It feels good to know that on this next journey of my life, I don't have to do it alone. This is a new journey for everybody. All the hardships, the struggles were not just my own. While I did time, everyone else did life. As I stepped out the prison door and saw my family and friends standing in front of me, I didn't want to look behind me. Behind me was dissolution. In front of me was absolution. Now I'm going forward, taking advantage of all my support, not afraid to ask for help when needed. For too long, I was trying to do everything alone. I was selfish and weak, full of pain and full of pride, holding on to so much anger, never knowing what I was truly angry at. That's all over with. All that sadness and hurt, I want it to be gone. I look into my children's eyes and all I can do is smile. I wake up with a smile. I walk everywhere with a smile. I smile because I finally made it home. So, let me just say, let's have a shared agreement among us. We may not always agree about a lot of things. We may have different belief systems. We may come from different races, ethnicities, different cultures, but let's share one agreement. And that agreement is that we will do everything we can for the well-being and full and holy and healthy growth of our children. Can we agree to that? Can we agree to that for every one of our children? And let's fight for every one of them and make sure that every one of them has a door open for them and make sure that everybody has one adult who will touch them, impact them, and give them the positive examples they need to be strong and healthy and full human beings in this world. Thank you all very much.